we'll get ourselves underway. And so good afternoon and welcome. It's good to have you with us today. We have on our panel today, Jennie Smith, as you can see, is the project manager for Visit Jersey. Thank you for joining us, Jennie. And we've also got, and you can't see him, but he is there. I'm delighted to say that James Lynch, who's the Senior Policy Officer for Safer Travel, has joined us on the phone. We're hoping that Marc Hurst will join us, who's a COVID safe specialist, very shortly. In order that we can just set the parameters for this, for everyone that's watching, this is, as I say, an industry briefing for those in the industry, in the hospitality and the tourism industry, in order that they have the correct information, albeit basic, the correct information on travel policy in Jersey. There has been, even within the industry, some confusion as to what reservation staff may be saying to those who are thinking of booking or coming to the island, and also advice for those once they get here as well. Well, we have the right people on the line for us at the moment. Jennie, I'm going to come to you first on this. Just in order to take us through this, just reiterate what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think some of the feedback that we've been receiving, whether it's from direct consumers or airline call centre staff, is that there's been a number of changes. Obviously, we opened our borders back in April. There's been tweaks, there's been large changes, fundamental changes, and hopefully we are at a point now where we have a simplified policy. And I think we just thought it's an opportunity to go back to basics. We're recording this session, so if it's valuable, if your reservation staff aren't able to join today, your front of house teams, they can watch it back at their convenience. So literally going back to basics, covering who can come, who can't come, what do they need to do, and also an opportunity to answer questions for the industry.
Excellent. You're absolutely right. There is a Q&A box actually at the bottom here where you see Q&A. Just highlight that, click on that, and you'll be able to pop your questions in there as soon as possible. We'll also be discussing who can and who can't come to the island in terms of visiting. I think that's fairly straightforward, but we'll go through that with James in a few minutes. So back to the basics then. What is the policy at the moment for people coming into the island? That's who can and who can't come. James, I'm going to come to you with that first because you're hanging on a mobile phone there. So who's allowed to come to Jersey?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Thanks, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be on video on mobile at the moment. But so I suppose just to set the background, I know we did a webinar a few months ago in terms of updating everyone on travel policy, and having been in the middle of it, I'm very conscious that there has been regular substantial updates to try and respond to the pandemic, but I appreciate that is obviously, it breeds uncertainty and difficulties for industry. So I personally do feel that where we've got to at the moment is a relatively settled and much more straightforward process. So I'll just outline the sort of steps in terms of the travel policy as simply as possible. So the first step to emphasize is that is the pre-registration point. So any passenger arriving in Jersey who's aged 11 or over is required to pre-register, and the link for the registration is on the Gov website, and I know Visit Jersey link through to that. And the people will, I'm sure, be relatively familiar with that process. So providing the addresses where you'll be staying in Jersey, and we do still capture the travel history, and I'll come on to travel history a little bit to talk about that. But so the first step is pre-registration, so nothing unusual there. And my sense is that pre-registration for public health purposes will be a feature of travel, not just to Jersey, but internationally for a time yet, until things considerably settle down. So then coming to who can come to Jersey, we are, I think, fortunate that the Jersey border's never been shut. It might seem that it's been shut, but the border's never been shut. And the current arrangement is in many ways a simple binary arrangement. So the classifications on arrival are based solely on vaccination status. So to clarify, and I'll come on to the travel history bit, but so in 99.995% of arrivals onto the island, really the only ones we really need to consider about, I'd say, for fully vaccinated passengers, there's a 1 test requirement and no isolation requirement. And for unvaccinated passengers aged 11 and over, there is a 1 test requirement and an isolate until they get the result of that day of arrival test. There's really 2 tracks that people go down. The obvious sort of question that flows from that is, what about children under the age of 11? So the simplest way to consider those is that the policy is effectively, they're invisible to the policy. So they can be discounted for registration purposes, they can be discounted for testing purposes, and they can be discounted, therefore, for isolation purposes also. So the only thing that really matters is whether a person is fully vaccinated or not. And it would be worth people familiarising themselves with the definition of fully vaccinated. So fully vaccinated means that you've received a full course of a MRHA approved vaccine. So in the overwhelming majority of cases, that's 2 doses of Pfizer, AstraZeneca or Moderna vaccine. Also Janssen now, I think, as well is considered in that. But obviously the guidance is online. So you have to receive your full dose, 2 doses, and there has to have been a 2-week period following that.
We have had many questions. James, I was just going to ask you about vaccination questions, and I'm sure we may get some. There have been, and you'll have seen the social media output as much as anybody else, I dare say, unless you sensibly turned it off. But there has been an awful lot of questions about having 2 different types of vaccines as one question, and certainly if you've had 1 vaccine in one country and 1 vaccine in another country, and some people have been caught between borders, does that matter at all?
No. So there's a different shaped question, I'd say, around our ability to certificate people who've perhaps had. We will provide the certification process is slightly separate, so I'll come on to that. But in terms of the border, Murray, if you've received 1 dose in Jersey, for example, and 1 dose in the UK, which is quite a frequent occurrence, there's no difficulty in terms of you receive the same variation in terms of the vaccination variation. It also doesn't matter if you've received the vaccination anywhere in the world. So originally we restricted, it wasn't restricted, it was around our ability to approve to vaccines administered in the common travel area. And then I feel it was quite an important step when we moved to accepting vaccinations administered anywhere in the world. So it doesn't matter where you've received the dose. It doesn't matter if the doses have been administered in different countries, but you get the variation when you arrive in Jersey. And it doesn't matter if they're different vaccines either. Okay.
All right, so there are. Thank you for answering that. I probably stopped you in mid-flow by answering that question, so forgive me for doing so.
No, that's okay. It's an important point. I think it's probably a good point to talk about providing evidence. So if I chunk it down, so starting with the easy side of things, if you've been vaccinated under the Jersey vaccination program, which is overwhelmingly residents, but not exclusively residents, but if you've been vaccinated under the Jersey vaccination program, the border arrangements are, hopefully people have experienced, relatively straightforward. So there is no need to carry physical proof of your vaccination. The system you simply enter your social security number, and the system will recognise your vaccination status and provide the variation. If you've been vaccinated elsewhere, you're required to declare it at registration points, and also we advise you to carry proof of your vaccination when you arrive at the border. And we have approached that in a relatively open-minded way. So, for example, NHS appointment cards are acceptable. Letters from GP is acceptable, and there is a spot checking process at the ports by trained staff who understand what they're looking for and understand the parameters. And the feedback that we've had is that has worked relatively well. We've had a few glitches with social security numbers, etc., but it seems to have worked well. So that's COVID status certification at the border. Obviously, just on that point, the strength of the variation that vaccinated passengers get has become less. So obviously a few weeks ago, it was a substantial variation from a long isolation period to a much shorter isolation period. Now it simply removes that first isolation, 12-hour approximately isolation period. Okay, if you can, I just hope people on the webinar can understand. I'm on the phone, so if there's calls and hands, questions and hands pinging in, please do stop me, Murray.
Yeah.
Just if I move on to travel history, there is one caveat to the travel history piece, though, and that is in relation to the English travel ban red list country, and we have tried to find and communicate this. I don't think we got it right initially. This is the list of 50 or so countries which the UK government have red listed and where there is a travel ban in place. So Angola, Bolivia, Botswana, South Africa. And the requirements to get into the UK are that you have to be a UK resident, and then you go into a managed quarantine, so quarantine hotel. So it's exceptionally difficult for anybody to arrive in Jersey with any of those countries in their 10-day travel history, because they will almost inevitably have had to transit through somewhere or transit through the UK where they get captured by the quarantine hotel requirements. So the numbers are vanishingly small. However, if anybody declares that they have been in one of those countries in the preceding 10 days, then they are required to isolate they're required to do 3 tests and isolate for 10 days. So the old red regime. So that's why we continue to collect the travel history. And that's the only relevant travel history we need to know about. So apart from that, you can come from Pluto for all we care. You get treated the same way, but if you happen to have been in one of these red list countries in the previous 10 days, then you come under different arrangements. And just the last point on travel history, this system continues to be set up for when we were collecting very, very detailed regional information from the UK. So postcodes, Surbiton, Redbridge, trying to pin down to really minuscule areas. And having used it myself a number of times, I know it is quite clunky. So we are working to make it a much simpler system whereby you simply will be asked to drop down and say, have you been in any of these countries in the preceding 10 days, which should hopefully streamline the arrangements for passengers.
James, thank you.
Go ahead.
No, that's very, very helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. I know that Marc Hurst has joined us as well, who's a COVID hygiene specialist, and we'll come to Marc in just a second. Question that is coming in, and the questions that are coming in from those within the travel industry, and we thank you for joining us. We have Jennie Smith from product manager from Visit Jersey, and 2 people on the phone who you can't see, but Marc Hurst is one of those, and James Lynch is the other, who's one of the senior heads of policy for safer travel. So, and we're talking about travel policy here. I don't want us to get too hamstrung on the questions that are relating to why are we not doing this and why should we be doing that in regard to testing. That's not where we are, but I just want to keep these going. A question from Robert, who says, what is the truth, and I mean the whole truth, regarding people vaccinated by one of the 3 Oxford AstraZeneca batches, which have apparently not been approved by the EU authorities, which, for example, presently prevent visits from Malta? Is that anything that Jersey needs to be concerned about, James? I mean, we can move on from that very quickly if that's not related to this, but I just wanted to raise that in someone's back of their mind.
Yeah, so I'm happy to tell you as much as, well, not as much as I know, that it's not something I'm particularly close to, but the information which has gone out and has been verified is that none of those batches were administered in Jersey. So there are no difficulties for anybody vaccinated under the Jersey vaccination program in terms of difficulties entering the EU. And the guidance we've had is that it's not something we are looking at, or it has no relevance to arrangements at our border in terms of what batch of AstraZeneca you've had or where it was manufactured. We've had a clear steer from Dr. Muscat, etc., that it's of no relevance that it can be discounted. So we are not looking for batch numbers at the border when we wouldn't prevent entry based on an AstraZeneca batch number.
Okay, thank you for that. Tom asks, are there any exemptions to business travel?
So good question. We had when restrictions were very tight, we've obviously had the critical workers exemption process, which has been effectively mothballed. And the reason for that is, I think the sense is that the restrictions are such now that work and business travel can be quite comfortably facilitated within the restrictions. So, for fully vaccinated visitors, there is no isolation requirement. So there's no difficulty there whatsoever. And for those who are not vaccinated, the initial isolation period is manageable. Just on that point, the test requirement, and for unvaccinated passengers, the isolation requirement falls away still with the provision of a pre-departure test. So for business travellers who can get their affairs in order before they travel, it's quite easy to facilitate that with a pre-departure test. So the answer to the question is no, there's no exemption or variation for business travel.
Okay, and just to re-emphasise once again, the 3 batches of AstraZeneca that were being questioned about, they were not administered or used or given out in Jersey.
That's the information I have, Maria, and I believe that well, I'm sure that's the information that's been communicated. So
that's the information we go with. All right, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Marc, I know you've been hanging on there, so welcome. I just want to check we can hear you and you can hear us.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you well. Thank you, Marc. Thank you for being there, and we'll come to you in just a second with some of the questions regarding, if you like, the advice for travellers once they get here in terms of their level of hygiene that you would expect venues to be giving out at this time, and any areas that you wanted to bring up on that. Jennie, I want to come to you with regard to the tools that are available. Visit Jersey is certainly the organisation that we would turn to at this side for those who are in the industry to say, okay, how do we manage this? What's the toolkit that we need to advise our way forward? And I think you've got the option to share screen on this, haven't you?
I hope so. It is just saying it's disabled. You want to try again? Oh,
I tell you what. Let me just see if we may have rebooted the system, which made that difficult for you. There we go. Have another go, and I think you'll find that you're able to share your screen so you can show us the toolkit that we've got from Visit Jersey. There we are.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I just thought it might be helpful. Lots of you will be aware that that Visit Jersey has some of these tools, but we're hoping to ensure that the whole industry has access to them. And we're really open, if there's challenges that you're facing, that you contact us and let us know, because if you're facing challenges dealing with consumers or with the travel trade, then other hospitality businesses may be facing the same challenges, and it may be helpful for us to put something in place. So one of the things I wanted to, unfortunately the slide will not move. There we go. So the first thing to mention is that we have a page on jersey.com, and the URL's here at the top. It's jersey.com/visit-safe. Gov.je is the one source of truth. However, gov.je is also targeting local residents, and I think it can be a challenge sometimes for visitors to pick out the information that's totally relevant for them. So that's what we've tried to do on this page, is just give a really simple overview of the requirements for visitors, and where it's appropriate, we have linked out to more detailed information on gov.je or other sources. So it's just a simple visitor-focused overview. And I know a lot of hotel or tour operators are linking to this page because we keep this updated every time there's an announcement from government, and it's just a little bit more user-friendly perhaps for visitors. The page is also available in French and German as well on the .fr site and the .de site, so it's jersey.com/fr. So I guess that's the first thing to mention. It's just not as overwhelming, I think, for visitors, which the reality is, I think when you're in the UK, you're absolutely bombarded by all of the different destinations and all of the different policies and the changes. So really trying to keep a very simple message. And again, with that in mind, once our policy was announced and we had the traffic light schemes, one of the key feedback that we were receiving from airline call centres, particularly Jet2 and BA Holidays, was, the call centre staff are trying to talk about multiple destinations, and it was really challenging. So we put together a simple one-pager, which has been updated each time the travel policy has evolved. And the idea is to just really be very visitor-centric. The key information that they need to receive. This infographic sits on that Visit Safe page that I mentioned. It's also in the Visit Jersey Media Library. It can be downloaded by yourselves, used on your websites. And each time there's been a change, we update this and share it. I also have a distribution list where I share all of the government press releases, the updates to the infographic. So if you're not on that distribution list, please get in touch with us. We're more than happy to add you. The best email address to use is product@visitjersey.je for that. Next, we have also set up, so Sarah Barton heads up our travel trade relationships based in the UK. And I know a lot of you, particularly the hoteliers joining us today, will be working really closely with different tour operators and travel agents. So we set up a monthly Visit Jersey update session, and it's very targeted to support travel agents and tour operators and the types of queries that they're having. And the key premise for this is outlining the travel requirements for traveling to Jersey. We know that the trade are bombarded by many destinations, so it's really simplifying their ability to sell Jersey as a destination. So if any of you as hoteliers work with tour operators and travel agents that you think it would be really valuable for them to be able to join this monthly session, I put Sarah's email address here for you to note down. Just drop her a note and she'll start including those tour operators and agents on that distribution and invitation list. I think probably a lot of you are aware of the Visit Safe Charter that we launched last summer. And the idea behind this was a series of checklists to help businesses mitigate risk from COVID. It's also to instill visitor confidence. So the more that visitors are seeing the same seal of approval, if you like, across multiple businesses, across Visit Jersey. It's a Visit Jersey, Government of Jersey and Jersey Hospitality Association initiative to really support the industry. And there's some examples here of how different industry partners are utilising the logo through their own websites, their own social channels. So once you've signed up, you can have access to a toolkit that includes social posts, logos, and so on. And I think the more businesses that we can have signed up to the Visit Safe Charter, the more successful and valuable the charter becomes. To date, we have over 120 of our key tourism businesses signed up to this, and more than 50% of them have been visited by the COVID safe team government. So there really is kind of checks and procedures in place to verify. And I guess on that note, it might be helpful to hand over to Marc, who's from the COVID safe team, because there's a lot of business support available to you about telling people off, and there's a lot of support available. So I'll hand over to Marc.
Marc, thank you for being there. I know you're on the phone. Jennie, thank you for that toolkit as well. Just to reiterate, people can get access to that pretty quickly, can't they?
Yeah, if you contact us on the coronavirus helpline at gov.je, through that we can organise a COVID safe visit, COVID safe advice. If you're worried about your deep cleaning, I can come along, or help come along and stop the place, and within 15 seconds we can tell if the surface is cleaned properly. And I'd like to bring up this point about cleaning. It's the old-fashioned way of cleaning, and I cannot back this up enough. If you're going to clean a surface, the best way to do it is to use a clean, hot, soapy water, the clean sponge or clean cloth, wipe the surface down with hot, soapy water, dry it off with a paper towel, spray it with your chemical afterwards, dry that off, and you will get a fantastic level of cleanliness, and it will be virus and bacteria free. And I can prove that with a swabbing machine if required. So coronavirus helpline at gov.je. You can contact us at any time you like, and we will send a visit around if you require one for advice.
Lovely. Okay, just in terms of that, we've spoken about this before, Marc, in terms of hospitality, hygiene, cleaning and cleaning of tables. Can we just understand the cleaning? And I'm sure I'm asking a question which virtually everyone here already is doing. But in terms of the products they should be using, there will be businesses that have older products, almost, dare I say it, pre-COVID, if we can remember back that far, but will be using standard products. What do they need to know or have on those products to know that they're using the right products?
Okay. Most sanitizers will have an E for Echo, N for November number on them. And if they have an EN1276, this is telling you this is a bactericidal chemical. If it has EN14476, this is virucidal, kills viruses. Many of them have both of these chemicals mixed now, which means they are antiviral, antibacterial. The main issue with these chemicals is they're pretty good at what they do, but you must follow the contact time. And on your spray bottles containers will be the advised contact time of 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes. And in the real world, I would say to people, are they really going to wait 5 minutes between each table? So I would go for the 30-second one. My advice would always be double it, do it for a minute. But for these chemicals to work and work properly, you need to clean the surface beforehand. Sometimes they're covered in grease, dirt, muck, whatever. You're just cleaning that top surface off. So a good old-fashioned wipe down with a soapy cloth, dried it off, then the spray of the chemical is the best way of cleaning your surfaces.
Excellent. Marc, thank you very much indeed for that. It's good timely advice. And again, if anyone needs that advice, where do they go to right now in order to speak to you? I'm sure they know, but worth reminding.
Yeah, coronavirus helpline at gov.je. And we check this throughout the day, and we'll get back to you literally within 12 to 24 hours, if not sooner.
Right, excellent. Wanted to talk about PCR tests prior to arrival. I think that's an important. Just what is the status quo at the moment for PCR tests? Just remind everyone what people should be doing right now. James, I'm going to bring you back in on this.
Yep. So the guidance is on Gov, Murray, but so it's a 72-hour period. So the tests have been completed 72 hours before arrival in Jersey, and there's a it has to be a PCR test, and there's some minimum data set. So obviously you have to show the name, show the name, a negative result, and the date and time of the test being administered. I might just time Marc in here to just check on that it's his team that manages the approval process, etc. So if there's some additional detail on.
It's only UK government accepted lab now. It used to be just a UCAS lab. It's now, we changed it to any UK government accepted laboratory.
Right.
Yep, so that's a good point. So I know that there were some challenges around the initial list of approved labs being unhelpfully narrow. So that's been extended out now, and the guidance is on Gov. And the next step, I think we've been saying this for a while, is a bit like the COVID status certification to extend beyond the UK. There are some challenges with that in the range of testing providers out there is obviously not as narrow as the range of vaccines available. So there's also the challenge of the approvals process, etc. So we're working on it, but at the moment it's UK tests only at the moment.
Okay. I'm sorry, Jenny.
I was just going to add another simplification that's been brought in recently to that PCR test prior to arrival, if you're coming from the UK, is that you no longer need to email it across to the COVID teams. You just need to bring proof of it to the airport. So that's further simplified.
Yeah, that's certainly
Yeah, that's right. And it also, I mean, I'm sure Marc will speak to this. It frees up some resource as well in the back end, so that approval process. So yeah, Jennie's quite right.
Yeah, again, we do have people at the airport. We will check people on a random basis just to make sure these are correct.
I just wanted to raise, and forgive me for going slightly along the lateral line of testing, lateral flow tests, which are used by businesses and reportedly 99.9% accurate, says Lee, and can be completed in 20 minutes. He's asking the question, is this not the way forward for incoming passengers? Now, I don't want to draw you into talking about testing policy particularly, but it does seem that if people are boarding, and also for islanders who may have be contact traced or feel unwell, that a lateral test is a much quicker turnaround of a test. Is that within the scope at the moment, James or Marc, or is that something that is just used for businesses at the moment?
Go ahead, Marc. Go ahead.
I think this is being looked at by the government at the moment. I agree the lateral flow test may be something we may well accept in the future, but at the moment not, just a PCR at the moment. I'm in the UK at the moment and I do an LFT test every day, and my son did one recently, very faint line, did his PCR positive, so they are very good tests. So that's something at the moment that I think we're looking at.
Thank you, and thank you for answering that. Jennie?
I was just going to add, my understanding in the UK is that lateral flow tests are available from pharmacies really easily. So whilst it's not, a border requirement for Jersey, in terms of your customers' comfort, they may choose to do one for their own benefit and then have a PCR test on arrival, but that, limits the likelihood of testing positive on arrival and ending up isolating in Jersey as a positive case. So it's just another piece of comfort for them. But there's no requirement.
Yeah, you can actually go into a UK chemist. You tell them what age group you're in, what do you want it for, i.e. workforce, holiday, whatever, and they will give you a test kit which contains 7 tests in there. The caveat I'd add to that is we have had the odd one that said negative and we found it to be positive with the PCR, but it's usually pretty accurate. As long as you use the kit properly, which I did the first time.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question that's coming in, I think I'm going to go to James for this one. And whether he'll thank me for it is another thing. What information is there regarding restrictions from other countries? And we thought this might come up actually when we were chatting beforehand with regard to France or Spain that require antigen tests or quarantine before returning. So just to reiterate, what information is there regarding restrictions from other countries?
So I'm assuming, just to clarify, Mary, this is about entry requirements elsewhere. So what we need to do to get into France, what we need to do to get into Germany. I think
that's the direction of the question. Although it's worth also then possibly moving on to talk about France because
yes, yeah, certainly. So on the first point. I think obviously being relatively up to my neck in it over the course of the pandemic, we do on occasion get some early warning around changes to border restrictions. France is the obvious one. We do sometimes get some sense or early warning, but otherwise we are largely reacting in the same way as passengers are to changes, because governments are, as we've had to do, changing their border requirements very, very rapidly without a lot of engagement with neighbours, etc. So, and needless to say that they are completely out of our control, really. On the France position, so the UK government have obviously taken an updated position on France at the end of last week. We are looking at that position. Our policy has been narrowed down, as I mentioned previously, to UK red list, so travel ban countries, that we will mirror those countries. France is not a UK red list travel ban country, but obviously the UK government have sufficient concerns to maintain an enhanced level of restriction, so it's only right that we look at that. But the position at the moment is that there's no planned change to treat French travel history any differently from standard arrivals, but it is something that we monitor the situation closely, and we look at the rationale behind the UK's decision. But the current position is that there's no intention to change.
Okay, well, that clears that one up. Thank you for that. If you've got any questions, now is the time to ask them, because I cannot believe it. It's already 4:15. It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun doing one of these webinars. And for those who are watching right now, there is indeed the Q&A box in order to ask any questions that you might have right now. Jennie, you're very often getting questions coming in to Visit Jersey, I'm assuming, and people are phoning you because you are the, if you like, the industry marketeers for this tourism industry. So are these the sort of questions that you're getting from hoteliers, from hospitality outlets? Are there others there that we haven't talked about?
No, absolutely. These are the kind of questions. I think it's really helpful to form like this for people to be able to ask them directly. I think as we're seeing a spike in numbers in the UK, well, in many places, one of the questions that's coming up at the moment is what happens if you've had COVID recently? Would you then test positive at the border, and how would you deal with that? So I know James and I have spoken about it, but perhaps that might be helpful for viewers.
Yeah, I lost some of your sound in the middle of all that. I'm not sure if James picked up any of that, but
likewise, Murray. But I think the question was around if you've previously tested positive and when you arrive. Is that right, Jennie?
Yes.
Yes. So Marc will probably be able to back me up on this. But so there's a protocol for previously positive within the 30 days prior to arrival. So you go through the usual testing process, and in the event that you return a positive test, that will be picked up by the team, and they'll ask you about your history. And if it comes up that you've been previously positive in 30 days, you'll be given a variation. Is that, Marc? Is that?
Yeah, so what happens is it's actually 28 days it's been agreed.
Sorry, 28 days.
If you've had and you can prove you've had a positive PCR test in the UK in the last 28 days, you've done your isolation. If it's still 28 days in that period, you're coming to Jersey and you prove positive at the border, we would treat that as old virus and we would not isolate you. As long as you're not symptomatic.
There we go. I think there's a question that's come in which actually would be a good one to ask the government, as opposed to probably Visit Jersey or a couple of the policy officers. But in terms of getting information out, James, I mean, you're head of policy, senior policy officer for safer travel. In the event of changes in the safer policy travel, presumably everyone involved in that policy is pretty much aware of the timing of giving that information out, in order that that information can get to the industry as quickly as possible. Some of the feedback that we get, and Robert has echoed that, is that releases of information at the end of the day can cause huge difficulties overnight dealing with customer questions in time for the morning. So just in terms of timing of getting information and any changes, and we hope there are no changes, but if there are changes to be made, that timing, does that come into the consideration at all?
I mean, it does, Murray. I mean, if we had communications leads here, they would acknowledge, I think, that late in the day announcements, and particularly Friday late in the day announcements, are really to be avoided as far as possible. There's a, that's in the context of at times a very, very fast moving, challenging sort of policy environment, but I totally acknowledge that. And I hope, I appreciate it's far from perfect, but I hope people might, I think we're getting better at trying to engage more closely to give people whatever warning we can if there's going to be substantial changes. Just on travel, and I may be proved wrong, but my sense is, as I said, that we are in a relatively well-structured position now in terms of our binary approach for vaccinated and unvaccinated passengers. And my own intent would be that that's quite a helpful, if there are to be subsequent changes, be it reduction in restrictions, or hopefully not an increase in restrictions, we could keep it within that structure to minimise the sort of the confusion around. We did have quite a confusing process around regions and countries and amber and dark red and light green. So I think that we now have a structure in which we could incorporate change quite simply. So I hope that's helpful. But I take the point about the communications. I can feed that back to the comms team who would acknowledge it, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. And I think a comment coming in on comms on this as well. From Stephen, who says, when news outlets report on places people can go on holiday, Jersey is not very often mentioned as in the common travel area. Now that's, if you like, the big ace in our pack is we're in the common travel area. The question really is to Visit Jersey. What is Visit Jersey doing to let Great Britain and the great British public know that they can travel here and there's no danger of isolation when they get back? Is that a message we're getting out, Jennie?
Yeah, so this is one of the key messages that we led with in the recent campaign that we've run, and it was all about being part of the common travel area, that we're with the kind of the holiday closer to home. We have put it out through all of our social channels. We ran the campaign through print and also digitally. We've also had record numbers of press trips this year. We've had really gold tier publications who have all been heroing the fact that we're part of the common travel area, because it is a huge benefit. I agree with Stephen. The reality is UK visitors don't need to quarantine on return. So again, that's part of the sales pitch for the operators. They don't need to fill in the UK forms when they return to the UK. And we would really encourage businesses to get involved and also push that out through their own channels as well, because we are trying to do that at every point. It's a USP for sure.
Yeah, and for Marc, who's speaking at the moment from Hampshire, he knows that that's true and all.
Yeah, I came back last Thursday. I'm coming back again on Sunday, and coming back through Southampton Airport, no checks at all. Walked in, grabbed the case, and walked out.
There's an endorsement for anyone coming over, if ever there was, that it's simple to come back when they need to without the complications. Thank you for that question.
And the other thing, Murray.
Sure. The
other thing I would add to that is you're now allowed to take 4 litres of spirit into the UK from duty free.
Are you indeed? Well, there's an added bonus that we didn't know. I might just take a trip just for that. Thank you for that update, Marc. Appreciate it. And I look forward to you coming back over. Jennie.
The other thing I would mention is that we are also going to be launching a campaign extending the season. I think a lot of hotels, are challenged at this time. There is hotels who are very busy. We know that there's challenges servicing that, so I think there's a real opportunity for us to extend our summer season, and that is absolutely something that Visit Jersey is going to be focusing on with a campaign around that as well.
I suspect there's an awful lot, and I speak very generally on a broad brush, but I suspect there's an awful lot of people with a lot of unused holiday, which is possibly the reason why you're extending that season as much as anything else, apart from the fact that it's very, very beneficial to our industry.
Yes, yeah, no, I think we've all got them to take. I'm hoping to take some soon myself.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I've been talking to friends here in Hampshire, and that's quite right, Murray. Many of them are saying just waiting to see where I can go on holiday because they're worried about going abroad and it turning red or whatever. So Jersey's a great destination, I told them.
Wanted to mention this, and Jennie suggested this earlier. We should talk about the recent requirements to wear masks again. And the impact, if you like, on staff firstly, which with the little heat wave that we've been having over the last, I'm told I mustn't call it a heat wave because it's not officially, but with the hot sunny weather we've been having for the last week, wearing a mask has been more uncomfortable than normal. So Marc, I want to bring you in again there, talking about that, and also James as well, in terms of mask wearing for visitors coming in and getting that message out. So Marc first. Just some advice for staff, because they are finding it extremely difficult to be wearing masks for long periods of time.
Okay, we're going back to about a month ago, the old mask laws, where if you're customer facing, you must wear either the full face face visor, not the chin visor. It is only the full face visor, or a mask when you're confronting the public. You can take them off when you're back of house to get some air into your lungs. But unfortunately, at the moment, in this hot weather, if you're facing stuff, even if there's a screen in front of you, you have to wear a mask or full face visor.
Okay, that keeps that fairly clear. And you know, in terms of wearing masks for and advising about mask wearing, of course, they're coming now from the UK where they don't have to wear masks, although people are choosing to wear masks, and it's being recommended in close contact areas. And they're coming to an area now which is open and free, but it's also got to wear a mask. So I think you know, again, it's a slight point of difference. So you know, James, clearly that's something we have to get through. That's a policy under review all the time, is it?
Yes, obviously we moved back to masks, the mandated masks. I think it's just as, between government and industry and everybody involved really, is to make sure that if people are coming to Jersey to visit, that they're aware of what the legal requirements are in every sense, you know, whether it's the speed limit, etc., or, you know, that wearing a mask is and all the public health requirements. We just have to be consistent, all of us, that we're giving people the information they need, so they don't get caught out or slip up.
All right.
And I think you'll find it's only been the 2 days since the UK have not been wearing masks, so it's still fresh in their minds. And all the shops I've been going to, I'd say 95% of the people here are still wearing masks in shops.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And thank you for your time on the mobile phone, because pretty uncomfortable for both of you to be not on camera, but to be there on the mobile phone has been extremely valuable to us. Jenny, I think we've covered most of the area, and unless there are any questions that are coming in at last minute now from the industry, thank you to the industry, who are having, you know, we all acknowledge, the most difficult of years following the most difficult of years. And finding our way out of that is always going to be about working together and getting the best advice forward. What are you seeing from Visit Jersey in terms of inquiries, people coming in? You know, there is an awful lot of information that we're getting, of some people saying bookings are up, inquiries are up, but bookings aren't as good. Where does Visit Jersey see it at the moment?
You know, it's an interesting one. I think this year has actually presented an awful lot of opportunities, for particularly through the travel trade. I think there's a lot of partners who have approached us this year as partners who maybe hadn't considered selling Jersey. So I think there has been a real opportunity in terms of the travel trade, and also the same to be said for the airlines. You know, I think the airlines are really challenged with their capacities at this point, and they're making decisions, you know, relatively late notice. But there's a real confidence in Jersey as a destination. I think there's a good level of sort of optimism. But I think there's a real high level of interest in Jersey. I think a lot of hotels are seeing a generally good occupancy, but there is definitely watch, and by that I mean, you know, late cancellations. That so it's very logistically challenging for a lot of hotels, because they're having to refill those rooms at the last minute. So I think we might have an okay summer, but it's not without its challenges, certainly.
Okay. All right. Before you all go, statement just coming through, which has been passed on to the media, which you don't need to comment on, but I'm just going to update those who are on the call that it's just come through. Now, we've been told by ministers that they have no plans to lock down, whilst there have been a lot of rumours circulating on social media today. And the statement which is being sent to the media says, ministers have received and considered the representation from the events sector, and a response to their letter will be provided by the end of the week. And ministers have also been discussing the prevailing pandemic situation and confirm that there are no plans for a lockdown. Further announcements will be made tomorrow. And I can tell you, I'm mightily relieved to be able to read that out, having had an entire day of the media and every business phoning me saying, do you know anything about the rumour that's on Facebook? So we've got it confirmed from government. There are no intentions to move to a lockdown, despite the rumours, which you should never listen to, and all the inquiries we've had from the media, and the government have released a press statement on that, and you've got to hear it first by joining this. Thank you to everyone in the industry for giving up their time. I trust that there was some information, some nuggets in there that you maybe knew but hadn't revisited or considered, and certainly there is information available, and Jennie, you have plenty of that on that toolkit, which I know that people can access fairly easy by going to the Visit Jersey website.
So we've got the consumer website, which the URL that I mentioned is jersey.com/visit-safe. That's where the infographic sits. The infographic also sits on our media library. The Visit Safe page has the kind of clear visitor-centric requirements. But I would just say, if you want to talk to us about specifics, if you have questions, then product@visitjersey.je or Jennie, Jennie, at visitjersey.je, and we're more than happy to work with you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much indeed. And indeed, we will be thanking everyone who joined this today, and we will make sure that those infographics will be included in the thank you, or the link to it will, which means that it will go out to the industry direct as well. Thank you for joining this Jersey Chamber webinar. We hope it's been helpful to you. Thank you to Marc for joining us, for James for joining us, and for Jennie for being there and coming up with the idea in the first place. Hopefully it's been helpful for you, and we'll do certainly more of these as time goes on, because I think it's a really strong way of getting information out to the industry when we need to. Until then, I wish you a very warm Thursday evening, and let's hope that whatever summer we've got left, that we can all make the most of it one way or another, and certainly within business as well. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.